Why defending yourself makes you weak. Machiavelli's ruthless trick. There's a moment in life, maybe you've already lived it, where someone questions your motives. It criticizes your character or accuses you of something you didn't do. And your instinct? To defend yourself, to explain, to clarify, to prove your innocence, your integrity, your worth. But what if I told you that this instinct, this deeply human urge to defend, is precisely what makes you weak? What if the act of defending yourself actually strips you of your power and hands control to the very people who want to dominate you? That's the trick. And Niccolo Machiavelli saw it centuries ago. In The Prince, Machiavelli didn't just write a manual for tyrants. He wrote a psychological map of power, how it works, how it's lost, and how it's taken. And one of his most ruthless insights is this: the more you try to justify yourself to others, the more you give them the authority to judge you. Defending yourself assumes that their opinion matters more than your posture, your presence, your sovereignty. And once you've made that concession, the game is already lost.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We've been conditioned to think that defending ourselves is a form of strength, that it shows we care, that we're honest, that we have nothing to hide. But truthfully, it often reveals the opposite. It shows insecurity, dependency, and fear. When you defend yourself, you're reacting, and reaction is the language of the weak. The powerful don't react, they act. They don't explain who they are, they demonstrate it through how they move, how they carry themselves, how they choose when and where to speak. Think about the last time someone misunderstood you. Maybe it was online, or in a relationship, or at work. You felt the heat rise. You wanted to correct the record. You wanted to make them see. But pause and ask, what were you really afraid of? Was it the lie itself, or was it something deeper, the fear that others might believe it? And that fear is where weakness is born. Because the moment your sense of self becomes dependent on someone else's perception, you're no longer free. You're in a psychological prison, constantly negotiating your identity with people who may have no interest in understanding you at all. Machiavelli knew that power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being feared, or at least respected. And respect is not earned by kneeling to every accusation. It's earned by moving forward with unshakable calm, by mastering the art of not needing to defend. Why? Because silence unsettles people. It creates space. It forces them to reflect. And in that space, they become the ones who are uncertain. They begin to wonder if they've misjudged you. They begin to doubt their own narratives. Your silence becomes a mirror they can't escape. And that is the essence of psychological strength. Let's take this deeper. Why do we feel such an intense need to defend ourselves in the first place? It's evolutionary. In tribal societies, reputation was survival. A false accusation could lead to exile, shame, or isolation. So we became hyper-attuned to how others saw us. But in the modern world, this instinct has been hijacked. We're no longer defending truth, we're defending ego. We're defending the curated image of ourselves that we've constructed for others to consume. And the more we defend it, the more fragile it becomes. Here's the Machiavellian trick. When someone attacks your character, they're not just testing your reputation, they're testing your center. They want to see if you'll break posture, if you'll flinch, if you'll collapse into explanation. And when you do, they've won not because they proved you wrong, but because they pulled you into their frame. And in power dynamics, the person who controls the frame controls the outcome. So what do you do instead? You hold your ground. You speak when you choose, not when you're provoked. You let your actions speak louder than your defenses. You move with such conviction that people begin to question the very need to question you. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. It's knowing who you are so completely that you no longer need to explain it to anyone. But let's not confuse this with apathy. Not defending yourself doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about your integrity than your image. It means you prioritize self-mastery over public approval. And that's rare, because most people are addicted to being understood. They will sell their power for a single moment of validation. But what if you let go of that need? What if you allowed yourself to be misunderstood, knowing that truth doesn't need to shout? Ask yourself this: would you rather be understood by the crowd or respected in silence? Would you rather be liked temporarily or feared eternally? These aren't easy questions, but they're the ones that separate the ordinary from the legendary. And maybe that's what Machiavelli really meant. That the strongest person in the room is not the loudest, not the most agreeable, not the one with the best defense, but the one who doesn't flinch when misjudged. The one who stands still while the world projects, accuses, distorts, and says nothing. Because they know that power doesn't beg to be seen. It reveals itself in the storm, calmly watching while others try to provoke a reaction. And in that stillness, in that refusal to defend, you become untouchable. The tyranny of sympathy, how needing to be understood destroys your power. We all want to be seen, understood, felt. It's one of the deepest human desires to look into someone's eyes and feel that they get you, that they know who you are beneath your defenses, behind the mask. And at first glance, this seems harmless, even beautiful. But what if this desire, unchecked, becomes a trap? What if the need to be understood is not a sign of strength, but of subtle dependence? What if the constant pursuit of sympathy is quietly draining your power, leaving you vulnerable to manipulation, disappointment, and self-betrayal? That's the tyranny Machiavelli would have warned you about, not the tyranny of governments or leaders, but the tyranny of your own emotional cravings. Needing to be understood means you're giving someone else the keys to your internal peace. You're saying, I will feel okay if you can see me clearly. But what if they can't? What if they refuse? What if they distort your truth, or worse, weaponize it against you? Now your sense of self is no longer anchored in who you are, but in how well someone else reads your soul. That's not freedom. That's enslavement. A soft, invisible kind of enslavement that wears the mask of emotional openness. Machiavelli understood this dynamic deeply. He saw that power isn't just about political control, it's about psychological independence. The prince who needs to be loved will eventually betray his own interests to maintain approval. The leader who needs to be morally validated will hesitate to make ruthless decisions when necessary. And the individual who needs to be understood will dilute their truth just to be relatable. In every case, the outcome is the same: weakness disguised as connection. You've seen it in your own life. Maybe you've stayed in conversations too long, trying to explain yourself to someone who never wanted to understand you in the first place. Maybe you've written long messages, desperate to clarify your intentions. Maybe you've overshared, hoping that if people just knew the real you, they'd stop judging. But they didn't, and instead of feeling stronger, you felt smaller. Because every time you beg to be seen, you're silently admitting that you don't fully see yourself. Here's the philosophical paradox. The more you need others to understand you, the less you understand your own strength. Because true power is quiet. It doesn't need to be translated. It's not contingent on someone else's emotional literacy. It simply is. And when you embody that kind of presence, when you become self-contained, you stop leaking energy through unnecessary explanations. You stop performing. You stop negotiating your truth for sympathy. And let's be honest, sympathy is a cheap substitute for respect. Sympathy says, I feel bad for you. Respect says, I can't ignore you. One is emotional charity, but the other is earned gravity. And yet most people chase sympathy because it feels easier. It feels emotionally safer. But what if you stopped trying to be the most understood person in the room and started being the most anchored? What if your energy didn't beg to be received, but simply demanded recognition without saying a word? This isn't about arrogance. It's not about being cold, closed off, or emotionally numb. It's about self-sufficiency. It's about developing an inner world so rich, so grounded, that you no longer need others to validate it. You can still connect. You can still love. But your love is no longer a transaction for understanding. It's an offering from wholeness. Ask yourself, how many times have you changed your message to be more digestible? How often have you softened your truth so others wouldn't reject it? What part of your soul are you hiding just to be relatable? These questions are painful. They dig deep. But they reveal the invisible chains we wear every day in the name of being understood. Machiavelli would say, the moment you no longer need their sympathy is the moment you become dangerous. Because now you're playing a different game. You're no longer trying to win hearts, you're moving in alignment with something higher than approval. You've transcended the emotional economy, and that terrifies people. Because most of the world is still trading their essence for emotional scraps. So stop explaining. Stop apologizing for your depth. Stop shrinking just to be palatable. Let them misunderstand you. Let them project. Let them walk away. Because the highest form of power is not being understood, it's being unshakable whether you are or not. The art of strategic misunderstanding, using silence and mystery to command respect. There is a strange, almost paradoxical truth about human nature. The less you say, the more people want to understand you. The more you reveal, the less they respect you. And this isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about recognizing that silence, when used with intention, is a language of its own. Machiavelli understood that power is rarely gained through overexposure. It is preserved, even amplified, through strategic misunderstanding. That is, allowing others to guess, to speculate, to wonder what you truly mean while you stay rooted in your purpose, undisturbed by their noise. Mystery, when combined with action, becomes a weapon. Silence, when combined with strength, becomes an aura. Most people are addicted to clarity. They want every thought to be understood, every action to be justified, every emotion to be validated. But in doing so, they become predictable. And in the realm of power, predictability is a form of suicide. The predictable man can be manipulated. The transparent woman can be controlled. The one who always explains, always shares, always clarifies becomes easy to box in, easy to decode, easy to dismiss. Strategic misunderstanding, on the other hand, is the art of being unreadable on purpose. Not because you're hiding, because you're leading. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered, not just celebrities or politicians, but even in your personal life. There's always something about them that you can't quite figure out. A tension in their presence, a depth behind their eyes. You don't know what they're thinking, but you know they're thinking. You don't know how they'll respond, but you know it won't be weak. That's not by accident. That's by design. They've mastered the art of revealing only what strengthens their position and withholding everything else. Machiavelli would tell you that power is not just about action, it's about perceived intention. If people can't predict what you'll do, they become cautious. They hesitate, they overthink, and in that pause you gain leverage. Your silence becomes a source of intimidation. Your unpredictability becomes a form of dominance. They start adjusting themselves around you. And that's when you know the game has changed. But let's be clear, this isn't about being dishonest. It's about being deliberate. It's about choosing your words like a sculptor chooses marble, carefully, sparingly, purposefully. But most people speak to relieve anxiety. They talk to fill space. They over-explain because they fear being misunderstood. But what if you allowed yourself to be misunderstood intentionally? What if you let your silence create uncertainty, not as a defensive posture, but as a strategic stance? Here's the truth. People fear what they don't understand. And when that fear is mixed with respect, it becomes reverence. That's the space you want to occupy, not the space of being liked or even loved, but the space of being considered carefully. That's where influence begins, when people stop assuming they know you and start studying you. When they stop reacting to you and start measuring their reactions because they're unsure what yours will be. Ask yourself this: what would happen if you said less, but meant more? What would shift in your relationships if you stopped clarifying and started observing? How much of your energy is spent trying to be clear to people who don't actually care to understand you? Let that discomfort sink in. Most people don't want to understand you. They want to define you, and the more you resist their definitions, the more powerful you become, not through rebellion, but through detachment. Strategic misunderstanding is not about deception. It's about discipline. It's about understanding that your reputation is not built through constant explanation, it's built through consistent action and intentional mystery. You don't need to post every thought, clarify every comment, correct every assumption. Sometimes the most powerful move is simply to walk away without correcting the record. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them build their stories in the vacuum of your silence. Because here's the Machiavellian twist: the more room you give people to misunderstand you, the more they reveal about themselves. Their stories say more about their fears than your truth. And when you understand this, you stop defending, you stop explaining, and you start commanding. Never compete, only position. How to win without fighting or defending. There's this illusion we're taught from the moment we begin to strive that life is a competition, that we must fight for attention, argue for truth, outwork others, outperform them, prove ourselves, defend our place. And so we enter the arena, fists raised, voices sharpened, egos gasping for air. But what if all of that, every ounce of that effort, is wasted energy? What if the greatest trick ever played on us is the belief that we have to compete at all? Machiavelli understood something most people never will. The truly powerful don't compete, they position. They don't fight for a seat at someone else's table. They build a table so compelling that others rearrange their lives just to be near it. When you compete, you're reacting. You're accepting the premise that someone else sets the rules, defines the standards, and controls the battlefield. But when you position, you redefine the game entirely. You choose your terrain. You decide where and when you engage. You make yourself incomparable and therefore unbeatable. Let's break this down. Competition is rooted in scarcity, one winner, many losers. It's a mindset that says, there's not enough, so I must fight to survive. But positioning is rooted in abundance and design. It says, I don't need to win your game, I'll create a game only I can win. This is not weakness. This is the highest form of strategic strength. You don't become the strongest by proving your value in someone else's frame. You become the most powerful by making your frame so magnetic that others see no alternative. Look at history. The most influential thinkers, artists, leaders, they didn't fight to be understood. They didn't argue to be accepted. They positioned themselves in such a way that the world had to take notice. They weren't loud. They were undeniable. They knew that when you stop trying to outmatch others and instead elevate beyond comparison, you win by default. Not through struggle, but through alignment. This is the final twist in Machiavelli's ruthless logic. When you no longer defend yourself, when you no longer need to be understood, but when you master the silence and the mystery, you stop playing their game entirely. And in doing so, you rise above it. You're no longer a piece on the board. You become the one who decides where the board is placed. Ask yourself this: how many battles have you fought that were never yours to begin with? How much of your energy has gone into proving, defending, explaining, competing when you could have been building something that made all of that unnecessary? This is not about giving up. It's about transcending. It's about realizing that the most elegant form of victory is not domination, it's irrelevance to the competition itself. But the truth is, competing makes you predictable. It ties your movements to someone else's actions. But positioning makes you sovereign. It allows you to move from a place of stillness, vision, and certainty. And when you do, the world reorganizes itself around you. You don't need to defend your worth. You embody it. You don't need to fight for space. You become the space. Let them talk. Let them doubt. Let them compete. You position. And in doing so, you become the rarest force in the world, someone who cannot be provoked, cannot be pulled into battles that don't serve them, and cannot be ignored. That's not just strength. That's power. That's Machiavellian. That's legendary.